I was focused on the same thing that most people in the modern world are focused on. How do I eat all day long and not get fat?
I'm a little bit obsessed with sourdough, but I'm also a little bit disappointed because most of the time when I get sourdough into a shop, it's not real sourdough.
Most sourdough bread that people have access to is fake sourdough bread. We want to create a restaurant that we would feel very comfortable bringing our family to and allowing the kids to order anything on the menu they want. From a underground storage organ perspective, I will never eat a potato skin the rest of my life. Number one thing we can do, and everybody can start tomorrow. If you are worried about plant toxins, but you want to keep plants in your diet, then eat seasonal. One of the problems that I see in the nutritional world right now is that
today's guest is Dr. Bill Schindler, an archaeologist turned chef and published author of Eat Like a Human. Dr. Bill has spent over 20 years studying ancient food technologies to solve modern health problems. He's here to expose why most store-bought sourdough is fake, reveal what we've done wrong with milk, and explain how our ancestors' food wisdom can heal our modern health crisis.
So tell us what has changed for you and your family. What were the things that once upon a time you used to eat or rely upon and you've now totally eliminated? And what were the things that you used to not really appreciate or prioritize that you've now learned to prioritize and appreciate?
Well, those are great questions. And I'll tell you, this was all starting, like this transformation was starting when Christine and I started having kids. So they were born. Well, the one thing I'm proud of that we did know, we really did have a handle on, was the importance of breastfeeding. So no matter what it was we're eating or trying to change in our own diets, all of our kids started their life breastfeeding, and Christina did an amazing job with that. So that was good. But then after that, we still weren't in the place. Olestra's experimentation was happening on me. I wasn't ready to start. At the time, if you punch in the internet, raw milk, like everything that came up, so you're going to kill your family. Like, don't stay away from raw milk. So all these things I was experimenting on myself, but my family was still eating kind of a modern American diet when the kids were young. So they went from amazing breast milk to Gerber baby food, and then to literally dinosaur mac and cheese sorts of things early. I mean, I'm very embarrassed to say this, but I tell you that because it is a journey, and I know people that are trying to regain their own health now or are just starting a family and want to make sure they do everything right. When they step into this world and start listening to all these health influencers and podcasts and reading all these books and all that, it's overwhelming. Like, it's so overwhelming, and it's such a different thing from how we've been eating for the past 30, 40, 50 years that my fear is if somebody looks at all of it at the same time, they just say, no, I can't do any of this, so I'm going to do none of it. I can't do all of this, so I'm going to do none of it. Or they try to do all of it, and it just becomes too overwhelming and too stressful, and then they bag it all. It was a process with our family. It took years and years to understand not only how I should feed myself, but how I should feed my wife and how we should feed our kids. And they're great. Like, they turned out great, even though they started out on Gerber baby food. We did. So the things that I'm embarrassed about that we did eat were, we had a lot of nut and seed oils in our diet that were sneaking in. So we were listening early on to the anti-fat thing. Most of my life I was on that anti-fat kick because that's what I grew up with. And the fat we did eat was things like margarine. And I don't know if you have it.
Oh, yes, we've got all this equivalent of can't believe it's not butter.
Yeah, can't believe it's not butter. I mean, we were eating that.
Scandalous thing. And the worst part, I know but for me, the thing that gives me most amount of anxiety is that some cardiologists recommend that to folks who've had a heart attack, and that includes my father. And then just think, for good God, just eat freaking butter.
I will tell you I agree 100%. I will tell you a very quick story because it's a terrible story, but hopefully it might land with some people. My focus on my diet for my entire life, because I always thought I needed to, or I always did, I needed to lose weight. I needed to get in shape. I needed to do all these things, I was focused on the same thing that most people in the modern world are focused on. How do I eat all day long and not get fat? Like, because eating is such a social thing. We want to snack. We want to do this. We want to sit down with a bag of chips and watch a movie. We want to do all these things. So our focus for many of us in our mind, and we decide how we're going to eat. And when we go to the grocery store, what we're going to buy is, how do I get food with the least amount of stuff in it? Like the least amount of calories or the least amount of fat or the least amount of sugar or whatever it is you're trying to keep out of your diet. And it's the wrong way to think about it. It is the exact opposite way to think about it than all of our ancestors who are spending millions of years creating technologies to extract the most amount of nutrition from our food and get the most amount of nutrition with the least amount of work. We're doing the exact opposite today. I mean, it is mind-blowing. And when I made that shift in my own mindset, like when I go to the farmer's market or the grocery store, if I go hunting or whatever I'm doing, I think, how do I get the most amount of nutrition with the least amount of work? That's when everything starts to change. But here's a really terrible, I can't believe I'm even telling the story, but example of the opposite. So when my wife and I were first dating, we were working at a restaurant in Princeton, New Jersey called the Alchemist and Barrister. She was a waitress, I was a bartender. She was underage, and I kept feeding her all these drinks underage. And the thing that she always wanted was something called the Bahama Mama, right? So I'd make her this Bahama Mama. We had no money, and we were in college, and she invited me over to study and meet her roommates. So I said, I'm going to bring all this stuff for a Bahama Mama and make it for you and your roommates. So I had no money, but it's like 10 things in this. So I bought all this stuff in the bottles, and I got a bag of Olean chips. Do you know what those are?
I'm not
So
sure.
Olean chips were these potato chips that were out about 25 years ago in the US. I don't know where else they made it. And the fat in them, something was done to the fat in them to make the molecules too big for your body to recognize it. So you would just pass, so you wouldn't get any of the fat when you ate these chips. Even though there was fat in it, it would pass through your body. And I got a bag of these Olean chips. Again, this is where my mind was at the time. I wanted to eat, but not get fat. So I was going to eat fat and all this. Right. So anyhow, I go over and make all these Bahama Mamas, and I'm a nervous eater. So I sat there, I ate the entire bag of potato chips. The warning on this side of the bag, there's a huge extensive warning that be very careful, don't eat too many of these chips because of the way this fat deals with your gut. And I am actually surprised with what happened after I ate those chips, that she actually still even talked to me. But I think about that all the time because my mindset was, I can eat this entire bag of chips and not get fat because they've done something to the fat and it's going to pass right to my body, which it did. My mindset.
I can only imagine.
It was horrible. It was like a comedy movie. It was terrible. But this is what we do when we go to the grocery store in America and in most parts of the world now. We have been trained to look for things that don't have things in them, and there's a sort of fear mentality about food. And look, there's a lot of things in food that we shouldn't put into our bodies. I'm not even suggesting that isn't the case. But when our mindset is focused on don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, first of all, we're coming from a place of fear. And we have created, for the first time in the history of the human species, obesity and malnutrition in the same person because we're eating such nutrient-free food. And it's all coming from this place of fear. There was a great study done years ago in American grocery stores. And something like 80% of the marketing and labeling in the grocery stores boasted about what the food didn't have in it. It wasn't boasting about what it had. It boasted about what it didn't have, fat-free, sugar-free, whatever. We do this. We go to the grocery store. We buy these foods that are free of all sorts of nutrients. And then we go and pay for memberships at the gym and we try to work off the extra calories. And exercise is amazing. I'm not suggesting that isn't the case. But what I'm suggesting is the approach for nutrition for millions of years has always been, how do I get the most amount of nutrition from this food with the least amount of work possible? And we did such a good job at that over millions of years that we literally built our brains 3 times the size that they were. We built our bodies much larger than they were in the past. We were crushing it. And now we're sitting here doing the exact opposite. And a simple change like that mindset makes a huge difference.
And you know what is incredible about what you've just said is, on the one hand, you go to the shop and you see fat-free, sugar-free, salt-free. But then you go to the awful cereal section. It's like supplemented with added that. So you take all of the things you need on one side, you put all of the other things in things that shouldn't have that thing on the other side, and you get Frankenstein food.
100%. But our minds, it's so different than anything we've been used to that we cannot figure it out. And now we have nutritionists and we have podcasts and books and all these things.
The one label, or when I see this on a box, I think fortified with. It's just when in human history have we decided that something should be fortified in something else because we removed that thing to begin with, right? Just extraordinary.
You know what? One of the biggest Franken foods. It's crazy. that when we go to the grocery store, no matter what our approach to food is, I think everybody can recognize in the middle of the grocery store, all the boxes, packaging, colors, all these things, that there's a lot of Franken food in the middle of the grocery store. But one of the most bastardized foods in the grocery store actually looks the purest, and it's milk. I mean, what they do to the milk is insane. And everything you just said is really exemplified in that industry, because you have milk that comes out of the cow. They separate all the fat. They separate all the nutrients from that milk. They literally pull so much out and sell it to the supplement industry. They pasteurize it. They homogenize it. They mix it back together at the lowest minimum amount of fat possible, because they're selling the fat off to us over here and telling us we should drink skim milk, fortifying with vitamin A and D, and selling us skim milk with no fat, with 2 vitamins that they boasted about putting into this milk that were there originally. We destroyed it through the pasteurization, artificially put vitamin A and D back into the milk. It is a fat-soluble vitamin, and they're selling it to us with no fat at all in the form of skim milk, so it's passing right through our bodies, and we can't absorb it. I mean, it's absolutely insane. But you go into the grocery store, you see a beautiful white gallon of milk with a picture of a cow on the front of it, and you think, okay, that is real, genuine food right there, and it's absolutely not.
And in case none of this was bad enough, you throw it into a bottle full of microplastic, leaching into it, so it's like really good for you, right? Sorry, I actually grew up in a city, but my mom, bless her, she's very aware of the importance of primal living for children.
Mm-hmm.
So very early on, she chose a governess, so a nanny, that actually had a farm. And that nanny used to pick me up from school and take me to the farm. And I used to milk cows, which I know makes me sound like I come from an ancient generation. But, not so long ago, it was normal to have farms into local towns or villages. And it was still considered normal to milk cows and to teach children how to do it. So I spent a good part of my childhood milking cows, stealing as much milk as I could. Of course, that was my favorite game. And actually just getting to go and pick up the eggs and seeing if they were still warm, and then cracking the egg and sometimes eating it raw and just eating it straight away. And now when I taste milk, I love milk and I love raw milk. I still have this childhood memory in my head imprinted of what real milk tastes like. I can still taste the milk, but I can smell the cow and the stable and everything in between. And now I taste milk that comes out of a plastic bottle, and it's been like removed from fat, and it's not milk. It's white water.
But what I love about that, so first of all, how old were you when that was going on?
So my mom got this nanny for me from 2 years old to 8 years old. So for about 6 years, I spent at least 3 days a week at the farm with her.
That's the power of what food can do. And it's one of the things that I found over a lifetime of doing this work. But that connection, that very thing you just described and described so well, I actually felt like I was there with you. I wish that was there. That sounds amazing. That's the kind of connection to food that we don't have today. And it's one of the main reasons why people are so lost in trying to understand, what they should eat, how they should eat, how much of it you should. I mean, there's so many things. We went to Sardinia a few years ago to do some research, and we ended up in the village of Villa Grande, which was the epicenter of the first blue zone ever identified. And it was we didn't do it on purpose. We just ended up there with this food historian and spent a bunch of time there with some amazing families and these shepherds, and we made all kinds of cheese and cooked and ate. It was amazing. A lot of things came out of that trip, but 2 major things that came out of that experience is, one, the way that the blue zones are described from a dietary perspective are 100% wrong. And 2, the connection. I thought the most powerful thing about everybody that I was with there, our whole family was with, was that they were all connected to their food. A nutritionist would have no job in this part of Sardinia, because nobody had any questions. Like, they knew everything about their food. And we sat down to multiple meals, multi-course meals in these very, I don't want to say simple homes, but just a traditional home, and everyday person's home. And from every single ingredient on the table of all these dishes, somebody at that table grew it, raised it, harvested it, prepared it, served it. The only food, and one of these meals was like a 5-course straight up Italian, meal where we were just eating and eating and eating. And the only ingredient of anything on that table that somebody at that table didn't have a direct relationship with was the wine. And it was brought by one of the women at the table, and it was her brother who grew the grapes and made the wine. I mean, it was that close of a connection. So that same sort of thing, the way you were not only milking the cows, but tasting the milk and feeling how warm the eggs were and eating some of these things raw and exchanging microbes with all of that experience is the kind of thing that the people that are living well into their hundreds, thriving into their hundreds, are experiencing on an everyday basis. And here we are in the modern world eating out of plastic and listening to advertising, and we're questioning how to do it. And so my biggest suggestion for anybody, the biggest help with me, mind-blowing parts of my life that helped me understand how and what I should eat, came from my own connection to the food. Podcasts, books, dietitians, all these things are very important. But when I actually got back into the kitchen or got into the woods and forage or went hunting, whatever it is, that's where my questions were truly answered.
There is something very primal and visceral as well about the taste, the feel, the sound as well, right? And, just going back to this story that you've shared as well about your experience and mine, for me, there is almost like a visceral reaction when I see on social media, things as ridiculous as eggs are the new cigarettes or milk will kill you, this kind of crap that we can read online. I go back to my sweet, sweet childhood, and I know deep down that cannot be true because I was so healthy as a kid. And also, the unhealthiest I ever became was as an adult, when I decided that it would be cool to try some veganism and vegetarianism because I was influenced by some yoga school I had spent a bit too much time in. And I thought it was better for me to go against everything that my mom taught me and my family taught me. Guess what? Hair falling, skin rashes, adult acne, weight gain, you name it, right? Bloating and everything in between. So it's when I removed what I knew almost instinctively from birth, and when I drifted further and further away from a primal, nose to tail, wholesome, farm-like diet, that I actually went into a mode where I started to need the supplementation, and I started to buy into the diet culture and do the yo-yo and do the this and that, and then you need to add back all the things that you've been stripped of. It's insane.
Yes, but you're lucky enough to have had that childhood to refer back to. I truly believe that people that decide, just like you, people that decide to be vegan or vegetarian or pescatarian, in almost all cases, it's for incredibly good, amazing reasons. The people that are making those decisions are making those decisions for the same reason that I'm making my decisions, applying it differently. But I care just as much about nutrition and sustainability and the ethics surrounding food. I apply it in a different way, but they're really valid reasons that people become vegans and vegetarians. But if they don't have that same sort of upbringing, childhood, access to a farm, access to traditional food, the way that your mother taught you about all of those things, then they don't have that ability to pull back from it and say, hey, something might be a little bit off here. And it's just, who's the next social media influencer that somebody's listening to and who's the loudest one. So yeah, I'm thrilled that not only you have that, but, a podcast like this and the kind of information that you're spreading is so incredibly powerful. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And I want to talk to you about something that I keep seeing on your feed that makes me go really, really hungry. And it's me looking at the picture of the beautiful sourdough bread that you bake, and I'm just thinking, I want some of that. So I want to hear all about sourdough. I'm a little bit obsessed with sourdough, but I'm also a little bit disappointed because most of the time when I get sourdough into a shop, it's not real sourdough. And I know this because I'm blessed in France with local shops to taste the real crust of a real sourdough, the smell, the slight yeasty texture, everything. So I know my sourdough. I like to think I know my sourdough. I have never tried yours, unfortunately, but tell us more. Not yet. Tell us more, because I really do think there is such a thing as fake sourdoughs. I feel like I've seen them, tasted them, and it's off.
Most sourdough bread that people have access to is fake sourdough bread. And I'll tell you a couple of tricks on how to identify it and what the difference is. So the oldest loaf of bread ever found dates to about 8,600 years ago. It was found in Turkey.
If you're enjoying this show so far, I just have a very quick favor to ask you. Could you go ahead and click the follow button or the subscribe button? It would mean so much to me. It really helps us grow the show so that we can enhance the production, we can bring you the best possible guests, and we can have the most amazing conversations. So if you haven't already done this, please take a moment today to go ahead and click the follow button or the subscribe button. And now let's go back to this amazing conversation.
Every loaf of bread from that point, and that's the earliest one we found. I guarantee you there's bread before that. We just haven't found it yet. But at least almost 9,000 years ago, our ancestors in certain parts of the world were making bread. And every single loaf of bread ever made from that point all the way up into the mid-1800s was 100% wild, long-fermented sourdough. It had to be by default. The difference between sourdough bread and one of the main differences and other breads, and I know you know this, but I'll just try to explain it for everybody that's listening, is that there's in regular bread in the grocery store, in addition to being a bunch of junk ingredients and emulsifiers and stabilizers and all kinds of preservatives and things, the only microbial activity that's happening in the production of that bread is yeast eating available sugars and producing carbon dioxide and alcohol. The alcohol we don't really care about, but the carbon dioxide makes the bread rise. In nature, wild yeast and wild bacteria live side by side. And when they have access to available sugars in the right environments, they both are operating side by side. So the yeast, even wild yeast, operates just like the yeast in the grocery store. It eats available sugars, creates carbon dioxide and alcohol. Depending on the application, we care maybe more about the carbon dioxide or care more about the alcohol, or in some cases, like in beer, we care about both carbonation and the alcohol, but that's all that yeast is doing. The bacteria, which again is right next to the yeast in nature. It's on our skin, it's on the flour, it's on the plants, it's on the countertops, it's in the air, it's everywhere. The wild bacteria eat the available sugars as well and produce all sorts of amazing things. They help detoxify by getting rid of lectins and phytates. They start breaking down the gluten. They produce lactic acid, and that lactic acid production is responsible for the amazing aromas in bread, the amazing flavor in bread. And as it produces more lactic acid, the pH is dropping. And when you get to below 4.6, and people are not talking about this. This is one of the most important parts of sourdough. When the bacteria create enough lactic acid and the pH drops below 4.6, it activates an enzyme that really starts to break up the gluten and make it more digestible and accessible to humans and not as inflammatory to humans. If you do not get down to that pH of 4, if you don't ferment it down to at least that pH, the safety benefits of sourdough do not kick in. So sourdough bread is a combination of bacterial and yeast fermentation, everything other than the bread rising, all the important things, the flavors, the aromas, even the textures, and most importantly, the safety and nutritional benefits of the bread baking are solely a result of bacterial fermentation. The yeast fermentation just makes it rise. So when Louis Pasteur was able to take yeast by itself and pull it away from its natural symbiosis with bacteria and just pull out the yeast and keep it going in a lab, we then started the production of the kind of breads we get in the grocery store shelf today, which is just plain yeast fermentation without any of those other benefits. So why is that important? Well, it's important for a lot of reasons. One is if you have a gluten issue, many times you will be absolutely fine on a true, genuine sourdough bread. We just confirmed our 11th celiac customer here at the Modern Stone Age Kitchen. I mean, medically diagnosed celiac that is absolutely fine on our bread. Now, we have some celiac customers that are not fine on our bread, but we know of 11 that are truly medically confirmed celiac that are absolutely fine on our bread because of the way we ferment our bread with both of those fermentations happening side by side. The reason that, now it takes a long time to do that, and as a bread bakers here making the sourdough, we have to be very conscious about everything from time to temperature to hydration and all sorts of things to make sure we get a consistent product at the end. It is much easier and faster to just open up a bag of commercial yeast, put it in with the flour and the water, and make a loaf of bread, which may look the same, but it's a different food. So here's the issue in two things. First off, we expect most consumers expect sourdough bread to taste sour. It doesn't have to. In fact, we all of anything that's made with flour in our shop is 100% sourdough, including our pastries, our croissants, everything. And we do things to them to not make them taste sour. We control the fermentation a certain way. So one misconception from the general public is that sourdough is supposed to taste sour. It's in its name. A lot of sourdough bakers hate the name sourdough because it's not necessarily a genuine representation of what we can make. So we have a lot of people coming in that maybe don't know what we do. Say, hey, what kind of bread do you have? Well, it's all sourdough. Well, I don't like sourdough. Well, have you tried the sourdough? No, I don't like things that are sour. Well, try this, please. That misconception and that real sourness comes from actually messing some things up. But in the production, what the modern industrial food system has done is they've said, you know what? I really like how fast and convenient and predictable commercial yeast is. But we know people want sourdough. Actually, 2 countries in the world that regulate calling the final product sourdough. And in most parts of the world, you can call anything sourdough and it doesn't have to be sourdough. It says, we're just going to label this thing sourdough and give the customers what they're expecting. We're going to make a bread that tastes sour. It's going to be a yeasted bread, but we're going to put things in it to make it taste sour. If you look at almost every commercial, large commercial industrial food system loaf of bread that says sourdough, if you turn it over, it's going to have 2 common things in it. One, it's going to say yeast. So they've added commercial yeast. And number 2, they've added something that tastes sour. So citric acid, lactic acid, or acetic acid, which is vinegar. If it says those things on the back of it, then if you're looking for sourdough, then turn it back over and put it back on the shelf because it's not sourdough. Almost every loaf of bread in the grocery store that says sourdough, almost every slice of bread or bun or roll in a restaurant that says sourdough is not sourdough. It is a fake version of it. There's only 2 ways to guarantee what you're getting is sourdough. Number 1, make it yourself, which is incredibly easy to do in your home, or literally know the baker. I mean, those are the kind of bakers you should be going to. You should be going to the bakery where we have direct access to the people that made the bread and we can ask them a question about it. Those are the 2 places you should go for sourdough. If you really want the genuine thing, those are the two places to actually get it.
So my palate was right when I thought it was fake.
Absolutely.
It was most likely fake. So just to make sure I understand this correctly for our listener as well, if we are buying it and we're still hoping that it's a real, not a fake sourdough, and we're flipping the ingredients, what should be there? What are the only ingredients that should be on a real sourdough bread?
It depends on how it's labeled, but here's a very easy kind of primer on it. Number 1, flour, water, and salt are the only ingredients needed to make an incredible loaf of bread. So if it just says flour, water, and salt, I guarantee you that it is sourdough. It could say flour, water, salt, and yeast, and we don't put any commercial yeast in our sourdough at all. There are a lot of sourdough bakers that do add, they use wild yeast and bacteria, but they add a little bit of commercial yeast in to allow the process to be a little bit more predictable and get maybe a little bit loftier results. So the presence of yeast on the ingredient label doesn't necessarily discount it as sourdough. And if they're going through the entire process of true, genuine sourdough process and adding a little bit of yeast, the health benefits are still there because it still has that bacterial fermentation doing all of the things. So I'd be skeptical if it said yeast, but it doesn't mean it's not sourdough. If it says yeast and it says anything acidic, anything sour in it, vinegar, acetic acid, citric acid, lactic acid, then I can guarantee you it is not sourdough bread. They literally are intentionally trying to trick you. And it is no better than, I don't care if it's in the brown paper bag and it's in a different part of the grocery store and it's $5 more expensive than over in the other bread aisle. It is a fake sourdough. There's no reason for emulsifiers, stabilizers, preservatives. I mean, literally flour, water, salt are the only ingredients that are in there. And just like with cheese, when you start getting a lot of other things added into it. Now, I know some people love gorgonzola and walnuts in their sourdough. I mean, I don't know what it is, but that's fine. The flavor, the aroma, the incredible nuances of real, genuine, amazing bread come through because of that bacterial fermentation. So when you start seeing anything, a whole bunch of add-ins, a whole bunch of spices or a whole bunch of other things into the bread, I would start to get skeptical that they can't develop that flavor through the process itself. So they're like masking it. It's kind of like when you get a really cheap cheese, but it's got a whole bunch of jalapenos and, all sorts of spices in there because it's junk cheese. And they're putting, cumin and fennel, whatever it is in there because they haven't developed the flavor through a traditional process to actually make the cheese. So that's another thing to be skeptical of. If it's got like 15 different types of, whole grain berries, wheat berries in there and all these other things, then there's a good chance that they're adding flavor and texture, not artificially, but by adding these other ingredients as opposed to truly developing it through the process.
So what if you make your sourdough at home, but you're getting your starter externally because you're worried that you don't know how to make your own starter or you want to jumpstart the process, right? Because that's quite a common thing to do.
So first off, on our website, if you go, there's a button on the top of our website, modernstoneagekitchen.com. It says Learn. And underneath there's recipes and blog. We have a lot of information on there about starting your sourdough mother completely from scratch and also how to maintain it once it's started. If you have high quality flour and really good water, you could start a sourdough mother from scratch today and literally be baking in 4 or 5 days. Like you truly can, if it's only a really high quality ingredient. The cool thing about sourdough and traditional foods in general, are especially those that rely on some sort of wild fermentation, is that level, that sense of terroir of place that comes through in food. We really only talk about it in wine anymore, right? But the growing conditions of the wheat, the wild, bacteria and yeast that are in the air, all these things, add these little nuances so that you could make your loaf of bread exactly the same as me, and they're going to taste a little bit different because of that. It's something we should really be celebrating. It should be in all parts of our food, but really only talk about it with wine. That comes through with sourdough. One of the cool things about sourdough is the wild yeast and bacteria populations in your house, in your kitchen, are slightly different than mine. And it's something we should be very proud of. We should embrace it because your loaf of bread should not taste like my loaf of bread, and it should not taste like a loaf of bread from San Francisco. That's why we go and eat breads in different places. There's a lot of people that understand that and really want to start their own sourdough mother culture in their own kitchen so that they could harness that wild yeast and bacteria and make that. And that's great. The reality is that if you want to get jump started right now and start making sourdough bread, get sourdough starter from somebody that's already doing it. Even if you go to the sourdough bakery down the road, get that. And even if you want that your own wild yeast and bacteria, once you've refreshed that sourdough mother 3, 4, 5 times in your own kitchen, the wild yeast and bacteria that's in your kitchen, on your flour, on your hands, in the air, is going to dominate, and it's going to be just like the sourdough starter you started from scratch. So don't let that sort of thing be a hesitation and stop you from making sourdough bread. Get it from somebody. We have people come in all the time to us and get some of our sourdough starter, and we have people that message us all the time, and we dehydrate our sourdough starter and send it to them, and then they refresh it. So if they're across the country, they might be getting our Maryland sourdough starter from the Modern Stone Age Kitchen, but in a month, they're making the same sourdough. They have the same bacteria and yeast in there that they would have if they started it from scratch.
That's really good to know. I'm so happy to know that because there is a lot of sourdough mysteries. So I feel like we've got the sourdough master. I also saw that you make sourdough pizzas. Tell me more. We do.
In the 20-something years that we have truly been on this journey to eat more primally, we've been through all sorts of, as so many people have been. We've been carnivore for a while. We've been keto for a while. We actually are still incredibly low carb. But when we opened up the restaurant, I wanted to open up a restaurant that only served the food that I was eating at that particular point in my journey, and which would have been literally like a massive amount of liver and meat and bone broth and all these wonderful things. But we wouldn't be in business anymore. There's like 3 other people in the county that eat the same way as me. So what Christina said to me and what we came to was, this is what we need to do. We want to create a restaurant that we would feel very comfortable bringing our family to and allowing the kids to order anything on the menu they wanted. And that's where we landed. So what we're doing is we're making familiar food as nourishing as it can possibly be using ancestral and traditional approaches. So you come in here, you would recognize everything on the menu, and somebody in your family would find something that they wanted to eat, and it would be the healthiest version of it. So we even have things like pizza. And I know that sounds strange because we're so focused, this entire place is so built on health. But pizza, just like so many other things, can be an incredibly detrimental, horrible, dangerous food, dangerous to your health over a long time. Or if it's made in a different way, you could make the case, and we do, that it's a nourishing thing. So we make, so there's no two ingredients put together outside of our walls here for anything that we have. Like, we do everything. We make all of our cheese, we do all of our butchering, we do all the sourdough, everything's made entirely in house. So if you come here for pizza, it's a sourdough pizza dough that it's taken us 3 days to make. We've made the cheese from local milk. We have made all the pepperoni, all the sausage from from pigs that were living about 7 miles away from here. And there's no additives, there's no preservatives. Everything has been through a traditional process. It's in our wood fire. So you come here, that is, if pizza can be healthy, I promise you 100% it's that. So it isn't, and I don't eat pizza every day, but we do eat pizza once a week. I mean, we are so focused on our health, and I'm telling you, we eat pizza once. And it can be, but it's a different kind of pizza than most people are used to.
And I love that you're saying that, and it's so refreshing, because I also fell into some extreme categories, as I'm sure you have, and I can hear already that you have. But when I got into the primal movement, I took it to the extra level, and I sort of played with keto for a while, and I bought in a little bit to the culture of carbs bad for you. You should eliminate all carbs. Grains are horrible. You shouldn't eat bread and all of this. And I've learned, especially because of my thyroid now being very happy with keto, that putting back the carbs was actually very nourishing for me. And my body does do way better with carbs. Moderate, but still carbs. I was wondering, can you tell us more about your experience, but also using the framework of primal ancestral nutrition, but also maybe a little bit of weight management? Because I think a lot of the fear around carbs is the fear of gaining weight.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing, if anybody listening to this takes anything away from this interview, I would like it to, if it's one thing, I would like it to be what I'm about to say now. And it may sound very weird to some people who are right now beginning their journey and starting to see improvements in your health. I can promise you, the diet you're on this moment, or the diet that fixed your problem, is not the diet for the rest of your life. And I know that sounds weird, because people are like, oh my gosh, I just found it. We're always responding to changes in our own health, in our environment, in a cultural situation, and we're always responding to these things, and they're all very much intertwined. One of the problems that I see in the nutritional world right now is that our diets as a population are so incredibly poor that almost any change that we make is an improvement, and almost any change that we make, we see improvements, and we get and I'm thrilled about that. But we get sort of lulled into this false sense of, oh my gosh, this diet, I just lost the weight on this diet. I'm going to do this for the next 50 years of my life. And the problem is, our health, we have things that, it's like a tree, and the first thing we have to pluck the first thing we have to deal with might be weight or skin issues or joint pain, whatever it is. There's something that is so outstanding at the moment that it is the immediate concern that we have to deal with. And then and there are a lot of diets that can help improve that particular thing. But as soon as that's conquered, you might have to shift. The next thing on the line now becomes the most important, and you might have to shift slightly. And some people see that as failure, right? They see, oh my gosh, I found this diet. It's exactly what I'm supposed to be on. And a year and a half later, you're either bored on it, or it's not working for you, or you start realizing it might not be perfect for your thyroid, or whatever that might be. And you've built this sort of persona and identity on, I am keto, or I am carnivore, or I am vegetarian, or I am vegan, or whatever the diet approach is that you've embraced. And now you start talking yourself into, I have to stay on it just because I've been on it for 6 months or a year. And I'm here to tell you that you need to be able to be nimble and shift, continue to learn, continue to listen to your body. And just because you've been doing it for 6 months doesn't mean you should do it for another 6 months. Just because it worked for 6 months, it still might not be the best approach tomorrow. I've done carnivore hardcore 3 times in the past several years. And I think for a multitude of issues, it is an amazing diet for a certain period of time. I mean, immediately you are by default eating a nutrient-dense, bioavailable diet. You are immediately cutting out all plant toxins. You are immediately, by default keto. I mean, there's so many, and it's very easy for us to understand in a very confusing world where we're talking about diet and health, and there's all these different people yelling at each other on the internet. I mean, it's very easy to do. You don't have to count calories. You just literally, I'm only going to eat something that comes from an animal. It's very easy. You can immediately start to see results in all sorts of health issues. But I will tell you, one of the things that I've found, especially with trying to raise a family eating in an ancestral way, or in any way, but that was our approach, being fully nourished as a human means so much more than meeting our nutritional needs. We need to also, at the same time, meet our cultural needs or our religious needs, or for some people, our political needs. All of the things that make up who we are expressed and are intertwined with how we eat. And sometimes, whether it's your own relationship, your family, your extended family, your community, all of these things are impacting how you eat, what you eat, how you find pleasure in what you're eating, how you find fear in what you're eating. So sitting down at a table and getting up from that table, half an hour later, being fully nourished is so much more complicated than making sure you have the right kind of macro and micronutrients on your plate. So something like carnivore, I thought was fantastic for a short period of time. I think it is a great approach for certain people to solve certain issues. But there's certain things that I love in the plant world. Like, I just love their taste and their texture or their flavor, or they mean something to me because my mother used to make it when I was a kid and I grew up on it. So we have gone back and forth with a few things. And when I was in a very orthorexic state of mind where I was forcing myself to only eat this, and I was so hyper fixated on it that from a dietary perspective, you could probably make the case that it was the most nutritionally sound year of my life. But I was a wreck. I literally mentally was a complete wreck. And now I think we finally struck a balance where, we eat a pizza every single Friday, and I'm absolutely fine with it. And it makes me feel good, and I feel great when I get out. Now, if I ate a pizza every single day, I don't know, maybe that would be a little bit different, but I eat a pizza every single day. So we have figured out this really good balance of, these are the foods we absolutely love. And if there's a food that you love, I can promise you there is a way to make that food safer and more nourishing than the way that you're making it right now. And that is really where we landed. And it's been an incredible journey. And it's helped not only us nourish our family, but we're now nourishing the community. And what I'm really proud to say is, we can tell you from experience, you can do it in your house and you can do it at a commercial level. So anybody that's telling you that you can't, they're absolutely lying, because it's working. And we've only been in business 4 years now, and we have 36 people working downstairs right now making food for the community. And it's all really, really good food.
I really love your take on it. And I've already told my husband that for the next breakfast in bed, I'm expecting sourdough pancakes inspired by you. So there we go.
Can I say something about the sourdough pancakes real quick?
No, you don't have to be real quick. I love pancakes, so take your time. I mean, sourdough and pancakes, you've got all of my attention.
So this is really cool, because when I always love to cook. And when I realized that there was this world of cooking outside of how I was used to seeing just in regular cookbooks, and we started doing things like sourdough and curing and fermenting and nixtamalizing, doing all these things, like this world was opened up to me. And then when I really started to get a handle on all of those things, I very naively, for a short period, said, you know what, I'm gonna get bored now. Like, I understand all these things at some level, and it was so incredibly naive. Like you could dive into sourdough right now, spend the next couple of years getting a really good handle on it, and then dive deep. And that goes for anything. I was so incredibly naive. But here's a cool thing about sourdough. If you want to dip your toes into sourdough, but you're really not, whether you may not have the time or cooking is fairly new to you, and you're like, bread just seems making start to finish a full loaf of sourdough bread seems a little bit of a huge step. You might not be ready for it at the moment. First off, I'm here to tell you it's a lot easier than you think. But that maintaining a sourdough mother, you can use it for anything that involves flour. And there's a lot of easier applications for sourdough than just bread. And pancakes and waffles are two of those. And here's something that's awesome. So it's going to sound technical for a second, but just bear with me. Flour starts at a pH of about 6.8. 7's neutral, so water is 7. And as the lactic acid is produced by the bacteria eating the sugars, the pH is dropping, which means it's becoming more acidic. When you get down to below 4.6, you're really making that gluten, turning it into a state that our body can deal with a lot better. When you get down to like 3.8, really low, that enzyme that does all that stuff to the gluten is like literally going to town and chopping up the gluten. It won't hold together. It'll be incredibly healthy, but it won't hold together as bread any longer, because that gluten, what it does is it forms this fabric like a balloon. And when the carbon dioxide is created, it traps that carbon dioxide in the loaf of bread rises. When you get that pH too low, it's incredibly healthy, but it won't hold together like bread anymore. Well, it actually starts to act more like cake and pancakes and waffles when you plummet that pH really, really, really low. Some people might be able to grasp the idea that a loaf of sourdough bread can be healthy, but still like, okay, the pancake is maybe a little bit of a stretch. Like the pancake, how can that be healthy? The pancake is actually healthier than the bread is. From a sourdough perspective. So what we do now at the restaurant is we mix up our sourdough, and you do not need to make the sourdough mother with water. Maintain it with water, but sometimes you want to put the sourdough mother in a recipe that doesn't really have a lot of water in it. So why are you going to add all this water to this recipe that doesn't involve the water? So pancakes and waffles, for example, are much better with milk than they are with water, right? So we make the sourdough mother with milk instead of water. So we put all of the milk, all of the sourdough mother, and all of the flour in, and we ferment that for 24 hours. And usually we refresh the mother for 12 hours and then make the bread. Well, we let this ferment, bacterial yeast fermentation, for 24 hours. The entirety of the flour in the recipe has been fully fermented for 24 hours. The pH is plummeted. The gluten has been completely chopped up. It is in its healthiest form possible for the human body. And then when we add the other things in, like the eggs, but it's sour at that point, right? Because the pH has dropped so low. When we add all the other things into it, whatever the sweetener is, maple syrup or unrefined sugar, where we add the butter, we add the eggs, all of those things have a slightly higher pH. So when we add those things in right before we cook it, that sourness goes away because the pH comes back up. We make these pancakes. And if anybody comes in here and says, I'm not really sure about gluten, what should I have? I give them a waffle or a pancake, because that is so if you have a gluten sensitivities and you want to try something sourdough, that's a heck of a lot easier to make than bread. And I'm telling you, if you let it ferment for 24 hours, you have literally taken that gluten and made it into its most, at least safest form for the human body.
And now I'm so hungry. I was hungry already with the pizza, and now I'm twice as hungry. So thanks for that.
You're welcome. Well, come and have pizza one night, and then you have breakfast in the morning.
Absolutely. Now, can I play devil's advocate for a second? If somebody's listening and thinking, I don't understand what all the fuss is about with sourdough, obviously that person would not be me, but let's imagine that person exists. And that person has this mindset just because they don't have any kind of gluten sensitivity whatsoever. They can digest gluten just perfectly fine. They just don't see what the fuss is all about. Does the regular person who has a regular digestion vis-a-vis gluten and no history of gluten intolerance or sensitivity whatsoever still get a health benefit from eating a sourdough pancake or sourdough loaf baked by you versus a classic non-sourdough bread?
100%. And there's several layers to that. Number one, people that are highly gluten sensitive or celiac have very obvious symptoms when they eat the kind of bread you're talking about. I would suggest there's a lot of people who may not be that in touch with their bodies and don't recognize that they feel as terrible as they feel after they're eating that kind of bread.
You're being so politically correct. Be blunt.
On top of that, when I start the sourdough class, I put out a tray of wheat berries with an egg in the middle, and like just an egg from a chicken. And what I say is, okay, listen, these wheat berries and this egg have a lot of things that are, it's a lot of similarities. One is their purpose. Neither of them are put on this planet for humans to eat. The chicken egg is on this planet to make a baby chicken, and the wheat berries are on this planet to make baby wheat plants, and so that the species continues to survive. And here we are as humans trying to get nutrition from both of them. They also have some similarities. If you cut each one in half, and a chicken egg has a shell and the white and a yolk, And actually, if you look at the wheat berry, it's very similar. If you cut it in half, the outside's the bran, which is like the shell. Then there's the endosperm, which is like the white. And then the germ is there. So from a nutritional perspective, the germ and the yolk have the most nutrition. And from a biological perspective, the germ and the yolk are both the babies. They'll become the babies of the next generation of what they are. That's the only similarities. And I don't know if I do a good job of this, but I'm going to try it here as well. So, okay, here's some differences. If that egg was fertilized and I grabbed it from the chicken, took it away from the chicken, she couldn't sit on it, and I put it on the counter right here in the food lab at this temperature and this humidity, I say, how long would that egg stay viable for before I would have to put it back under that chicken and have it sit on it, and then it could support new life? And the answer is about 7 to 10 days. I can pull that egg away from the chicken for about 7 to 10 days if it's fertilized, and then stick it back, and then I'd have to stick it back under the chicken in order for it to produce a successful baby chicken. But then I said, what about this wheat berry? If I set this wheat berry on this counter, how long would it stay viable for? Because essentially the wheat berry is fertilized like that chicken egg is. It's just dormant. How long could it stay? And up until about 2 months ago, the answer would have been at least 7,000 years, because I know we've pulled grains from archaeological sites and fertilized them, and sprouted them, and they've grown maize plants. But they just found a seed in the stomach of an extinct squirrel. That 38,000-year-old squirrel ate this seed, and they pulled it out of the ice and took the seed and planted it, and it made a new plant. So at least 38,000 years. So what's the difference? Well, the difference is that egg is protected primarily by that physical shell, a little bit of chemical stuff, and mostly that shell. And it'll go bad very shortly. But that seed is kept dormant by a whole lot of anti-nutrients and phytates and lectins and all of these things that will not allow that. I mean, the whole role of those anti-nutrients on the outside of the wheat berry is to make sure that it doesn't sprout until it's in the right conditions to create new life, because otherwise it would just result in dying. Those anti-nutrients have to let down their walls. The seeds have to let down their defenses before that can sprout. So things like sprouting or fermentation or soaking are essential to transforming this thing that has no business going into our bodies into something that we can safely derive nutrition from. A loaf of Wonder Bread here in America takes 1 hour to make start to finish. From dried flour, measured it out, to mixing all of it, baking, cooling, slicing, and putting it in a bag, literally 1 hour. There is no opportunity for those grains to go through any sort of process that makes them safe enough for the human body to actually derive nutrition from them in an efficient way. A loaf of sourdough bread, it depends. Starting to refresh your mother, it can take anywhere between 18 hours to a couple days, depending on how you're making that bread. And what we're doing is we're fermenting those grains. We are putting those grains in an environment that's very similar to when it would sprout anyhow, and transforming this thing that has no business going into our body into something that's safer and more nourishing. So whether or not they physically feel, or at least detect that they physically feel a certain way after they've eaten commercial bread, I can promise you that they are getting a load of anti-nutrients, a load of phytates and lectins. And even though there is nutrition in that bread, a lot of it is going to be unavailable to their bodies unless it's gone through the proper process. Was that okay without being too politically incorrect?
That was terrific. That's probably one of the best answer I've ever gotten on this show to a question that I've asked. So yes, I'm very happy with this answer. I'm very detail orientated, so that was fantastic, and it's the perfect segue into the other question that I had in mind, because you were talking about the sprouting and all the different process. I want to talk about the plant toxins and the plant world and get your standpoint on it. Because again, when you start tapping into carnivore, when you start going into this world, which I did, then you start to want to eliminate all the plants. And I did that. And I have to say that from a pure digestion standpoint, sort of forgetting about my thyroid for a minute, like almost just taking organs one by one, like if it was just my digestion, it was the best diet I've ever been on. You know, it was just zero bloating, zero indigestion, zero reflux. It's just perfect. And it makes sense, right? It's literally meat.
Right.
But I reintegrated some plants, some more successfully than others. So I would love your take on plant toxins, maybe demystify some of the things that we may be thinking about, talk about your personal experience, and what have you learned about plant toxins?
Just like we started this conversation with, I'm very nervous about fueling the fear that's surrounding the dietary world right now. And one of the places where there's a lot of fear is around plant toxins. It is something we need to recognize. It is something we need to respect, but it shouldn't instill this sort of fear that I think that I know that I've experienced, but a lot of people I've talked to have experienced as well. We're talking about food. We're talking about one of the, other than potentially love and interpersonal relationships, the most human nourishing thing we can have in our life is food. And that's the last place we should have fear and anxiety, because even if we're getting all the nutrition that we need, the other feelings surrounding the experience are not nourishing as well. We need to have the entire package. So here's the story with plant toxins. And I think I finally landed at a good place. And I'm glad we're having this conversation now as opposed to like 6 years ago when I might have given you a more fear-centered answer. And it was at the time I was battling a lot of issues with oxalates. It is true that every single plant on this planet have toxins. Every single one of them. One of the concerns that I have is we were brought up in a world where we have this sort of dichotomy, this black and white. This plant is either edible or toxic, edible or deadly, edible or it can hurt you. And that dichotomy is false. And I'm telling you this from two perspectives. Number one of the things that's been a focus of my research for over 20 years is traditional ways of detoxifying plants. I mean, that has been a huge focus of my research. And I know it sounds like this strange thing to focus on, but I was fascinated by it and I still am. And it was all from an archaeological perspective for years. And now we do a lot of work with indigenous and traditional groups all over the world where we spend time with them learning how to detoxify plants. We actually just got back from Brazil 2 weeks ago, learning how to detoxify bitter manioc, which has cyanide. It's an amazing thing. The second thing is I'm 52 years old. I started foraging when I was 10 years old. And I've been leading foraging tours now for almost 30 years. So I have a really strong connection with wild plants and toxins, and also from an academic perspective, detoxification of plants through time, traditional ways. So here's I think one thing we need to understand. And one of the ways I start my foraging tours now, we go into the middle of a patch of all sorts of plants. And I say, let's look around. Every single one of the plants you're looking at has some sort of toxin in it. Some of them will kill you outright. Some of them could make you sick over a long period of time. Some of them might just upset your belly. Some of them are so benign you wouldn't even recognize that there was something going on with that plant. Every single one of these plants also has the ability to provide nutrition if they're prepared the right way. It isn't the fact necessarily that it has a toxin or doesn't. Part of the thing we need to understand is, how is that plant being prepared? How is it being consumed? How much of it is being consumed? What is the context in which it's being consumed? What other things are we consuming with it at the same time? One other thing that we need to recognize is that the very same things that we call toxins in certain applications are the flavors we like in spices and or medicine. And the very same plant, the very same toxin in a plant can result in death, it can result in healing, and it could result in spice. Right, so cinnamon is a great example. Cinnamon is a natural insecticide produced by a tree, in the bark of a tree, to keep insects off it. In very small doses, we love it. We love mixing it with sugar and putting it in things and making cakes and things. In higher doses, it would make us sick, and in very, very high doses, we could end up in the hospital. It all has to do with things like dosage. So we need to understand plants have toxins. We need to respect that plants have toxins, but it doesn't need to be a fear-like thing. What we need to understand is, okay, what can we do? If you want to include a plant into your diet, these are the things we need to understand. One is, what are the toxins in that plant? How do I prepare that plant to not only get rid of the toxins, but also make the nutrients in that plant more available to my body? And, what does that mean for including it in my diet? And that's the key. It isn't all this or none of this. It's what can I do? So the number one thing, because there's a lot of things we can do, and it gets very, very, very complicated. But again, I don't want us to be an overwhelming thing. The number one thing we can do, number one thing we can do, and everybody can start tomorrow. If you are worried about plant toxins, but you want to keep plants in your diet, then eat seasonally. Like literally, if you eat seasonally, you will overcome 80 to 90% of the issues with plants, because something like spinach was incredibly high in oxalates. If all we did was eat spinach during the time that it would grow in our area naturally, not without big, greenhouses and hoop houses and things and changing the microclimate. If we only ate spinach for the couple weeks out of the year that it grew where we live, then we wouldn't have an issue with the oxalates, and we might get a little bit higher dose of oxalates for 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden we don't eat spinach for the rest of the year. Literally doing that, if you have an issue with plants and you're not ready to completely eliminate them from your diet, or you just don't want to, which is perfectly fine, eat seasonally, and then you've solved a lot. You've created a lot of space. You've improved the safety in your diet, and then you can now look at the little nuances. The second thing to understand is, from a very basic biological perspective, it's very easy to sort of guess what parts of plants could potentially have a lot higher toxin and which ones have a lot lower toxins. And that can help be at least sort of a 50,000 foot view guide. So here's a very quick example. Most parts of the plants are trying to protect itself and keep things away. And that's the most important part of the plant. So plants that have roots, corms, tubers, especially where they store a lot of carbohydrates and they live off of that, that's a very important part of a plant. So typically there's a lot of toxins in that. And so we call them underground storage organs. And the majority of the toxins are typically in the skin, which makes sense. If the plants are producing toxins to protect itself, then the outside should have a higher percentage of toxins because it's protecting against insects and fungus and disease and predators and that sort of thing. So things like potatoes are loaded with toxins. The majority of the toxins are actually in the skin. So peeling underground storage organs like potatoes is a fantastic way to get rid of most of the toxins. Stalks, shoots, leaves, that sort of thing, depending on the plant and depending on the season and depending on the growing conditions, they could have more or less toxins. So a great example is a dandelion. Dandelion leaves in the spring and early summer have a very low toxin load and are not that very bitter. You get into the middle of the summer, their toxin load increases. You never want to eat dandelion greens in the middle of the summer. And then when it gets to the fall, they lose a lot of that toxins again. So that's a little more nuanced. But here's what's really interesting. Flowers are one of the two parts of plants that are designed to attract, not ward things off. So flowers, it's no surprise. It shouldn't be a surprise that flowers are beautiful and they smell good and sometimes even taste good and are usually very, very, very low in toxins because they're trying to attract things like pollinating insects to do their job to make sure the plants function. So flowers are typically pretty safe. We don't have a lot of flowers in our diet, so that's not a very big deal. Fruits are where I think the biggest part of this conversation is important. Fruits and seeds are two entirely different things. Seeds are the next generation of the plant. They are heavily guarded through plant toxins. So seeds, nuts, grains, and legumes are all heavily guarded with toxins because that's the baby of the plant and they're putting a lot of effort into protecting that part. But the fruit is a completely different thing. The fruit is meant to attract. The role of a fruit is to attract an animal only when the seeds are mature and ripe so that the animal eats the fruit, takes in the seeds go through the digestive tract and land in a pile of manure somewhere else. So the fruits are beautiful. They smell sweet. They taste sweet. They're usually very, very low in toxins or toxin-free when the seeds are ripe. This is not the case when the seeds are not ripe. Like in most cases, especially with wild fruits, but it's still the case for domesticated fruits as well. If the seeds aren't ripe, the fruit is actually acting as a barrier so that they're not eaten ahead of time. Because if they're eaten before they're ripe, they're never going to mature into a plant. So unripe fruits, especially wild ones, but also domesticated ones, either are incredibly toxic or at least have a higher level of toxin than when they're fully ripe and they turn that toxin load off. Now, I'm not talking about a carbohydrate perspective, but from a plant toxin perspective, ripe fruits are usually incredibly safe. From a underground storage organ perspective, I will never eat a potato skin the rest of my life. I did a lot of work in Bolivia and Peru with ancient ways of it. I was in the heart of where the potato was first domesticated 10,000 years ago. And I was living with some Quechua native groups and some Aymara Indian groups. And we were detoxifying potatoes and doing all these things. But every single potato I saw for the entirety of time I was in South America was peeled, except for one instance. Every single one of them was peeled. And I asked everybody, why do you peel the potato? And it was always the same answer. That's where all the poison is. That's where all the poison is. So I know I grew up, I don't know if it's the same as you. I grew up with this, always eat the potato skin. That's where all the nutrients are. First of all, that is not true. And even if it was true, it is not worth the toxins that come in with it. So the three big things I can say is, if you eat seasonally, you're solving a whole lot of issues. And again, if it's the middle of the winter and you're at a restaurant and you have the whatever Florentine and the spinach comes in, it's not a very big deal. I mean, I'm talking about your diet on a regular daily basis. Eating seasonally, you accomplish a lot. Peeling roots, especially things, high carbohydrate roots like potatoes, is hugely effective. And then only eating ripe fruits. But if you're going to eat fruits, ripe fruits are the lowest toxin.
Can I just ask in relation to the potato skin, because I'm thinking about my own personal experience, and I love to bake sweet potatoes, and I usually bake them with butter to make them really crusty and nice Celtic salt, and I do love the skin, but should I stop eating it?
Look, again, I think it's like everything else.
Tell me the truth.
It'd be a huge soundbite on here. No, you should never eat potato skins. A domesticated potato skin is not going to be the end of the world. But if you're eating potatoes every single week and you're eating those potato skins every single week, then that's the sort of thing that can creep up and cause problems over time. Now, the potatoes, heirloom, ancient varieties of potatoes, the kinds we were dealing with in Bolivia and Peru, yes, that would have been a huge issue. The domesticated, in fact, I'll send you a link. You can put it in the show notes. I wrote an article about the potato research in the Wise Traditions journal, and it has all the numbers. And one of the things, I forget the exact number off the top of my head, but the modern potatoes in the grocery store have the same toxins as the ancient ones have. They're just at lower levels. You can get away with just baking a potato, not doing a lot of the extensive processing. If you're eating a potato, you can get away with eating a few potato skins. It's not the end of the world. It becomes an issue when you're eating massive amounts of these things day after day or week after week, and these toxins start to build up and cause a whole lot of issues. It's worth peeling the potato all the time if you have access to it, but it's also, you go out to a restaurant and you have a potato, it's in front of you and it's all cut up and it's got the skins on it. Is that going to cause an issue? Yeah, probably not. So when you start to think about the biological aspects of plants and the potential for different toxins now, one of the things I'm telling you is skins and seeds have higher level of skins have higher level of toxins, peels have higher level of toxins, seeds are quite often loaded with toxins. So think about that. Now, my grandmother, on my Italian side, my grandmother loved tomatoes. She literally ate potatoes all the time, and they were destroying her feet. Like her feet and her ankles would swell up. She had all these issues every time she ate a tomato later on in life. My dad started to get the same way. I will tell you that I started to get the same sort of thing. And then I thought about it with the tomato, and I'm like, you know what? Instead of just saying, oh my God, just forget tomatoes, they must be horrible for you, I went back. What is the issue? Tomato is actually a fruit. Where should most of the toxins be? They should be in the skins and they should be in the seeds. So my father and I now, if we eat seeded tomatoes without the skins, or tomato sauce that is, when you put it through the mill and the skins and the seeds stay behind, no adverse feelings whatsoever afterwards. And that. It's fascinating when you start thinking about some of these things. We do that sort of throwing out the baby with the bathwater sometimes. No, wait a second. Let's just think about this. What is it we should be eating? What is it we shouldn't be eating? What is it that potentially has toxins? How can we prepare some of these things? How can we process them in certain ways? And I'm telling you, for some of you who something like that, who's somebody who loves tomatoes. I mean, you love tomatoes and you think, well, for the rest of my life, I can never have a tomato. Literally, you may be able to find out now that you can have tomatoes, but you just can't have the skins or the seeds because that's part of the plant defense mechanism.
Well, if you can help me solve one of my one-way relationship, I would be grateful forever. You see, I have a one-way relationship with garlic. I love it. I'm French, so of course, it does not love me back.
Really?
Oh, Yes, garlic, and I'm the kind of person that can literally eat the cloves. Like, that's how much I like the garlic. I just love it. I've tried to cook it, I've tried to roast it, I've tried to bake it. Not happy. Really
I'm
triggers
actually
my
really
digestion.
embarrassed. I have nothing to say about garlic.
Oh. So there you go. Homework, research.
That's some
If you
homework for
ever
sure.
write an article on how to digest garlic better, I will be forever grateful.
I will look into it though for sure.
Well, I am so grateful for this conversation. I've learned so much. I have about 10 more questions for you. So here's my suggestion. I should come to your beautiful lab so that I can eat a sourdough loaf, eat a pizza, eat some pancakes, and do an all in-person podcast follow-up. How does that sound?
I think that sounds perfect. You tell me when. We have a place for you to stay right next door.
That's the plan. Before I let you go, I am so grateful for your book, Eat Like a Human. I'll be sure to put the link in the show notes. But is there any other resources that you would like to send our listeners to so that they get more familiar to your world?
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. So we have here, we're located in Chestertown, Maryland. So we're on the East Coast of the United States. We have a full service restaurant called the Modern Stone Age Kitchen, and we have a teaching and research lab called the Modern Stone Age Food Lab. They're right on top of one another. If anyone is coming, please, we live in this cute little historic town, but we're only about an hour from Washington, D.C., an hour and a half from Philadelphia, and about 3 hours from New York City. So it's very easy to access us. In addition to coming here and letting us nourish you, we are always holding all sorts of classes on how to implement everything we talked about on this podcast and a bunch of other things in your own home. And I've realized, though, for some of you, that still isn't going to happen, maybe if you're not coming to this part of the world. So we've been asked for a long time, and I'm thrilled to announce that we finally just launched this. We are getting together every Monday night virtually, and I'm doing a half an hour, a quick cooking demo on a different topic that somebody's asking about, and then we're just doing live Q&As after that. And our goal is to just empower people to reconnect with their food and nourish themselves and their families. So if anybody's looking to reconnect with their food in their kitchens and do exactly that, you can find out all the information on our website at modernstoneagekitchen.com.
I love the sound of that. I'm definitely going to come and join. I love it. Thanks so much. I so appreciate your wisdom today, and I wish you a beautiful day ahead. And please go and give the world more pizzas. We need you.
Thank you so much.
Take care.